What's up, YouTube? You ever get into the Christmas spirit by just wanting to zone out for a league and teamer battle rage some people? Yeah, that's me. So I decided to kind of pick up post-banning Modern with some Rakdos Shadow, try out some battle rages. Maybe there's fewer Terminates running around with Scam and fewer Solitudes with Beanstalk getting hit. And that could be a soft spot to just like double strike, trample some shadows, or in this case, Souls of the Lost. So, if you haven't seen Rakdos before, you've probably been under a rock for the last like 5 years. But the gist of the deck is we're kind of old school Shadow with the battle rage feel, but far more on the aggressive skew, less on the controlling side. We don't really have the ability to say no to very much. But what we do have is consistent threats, consistent pressure, and hopefully just enough life loss to make sure our Shadow or our Souls of the Lost, whatever threat you decide to play, can crack through for lethal through some blockers in a very timely manner. So this particular list, whole bunch of 4-ofs, like 4 Shadow, 4 Ragavan, 4 Darcy, 4 Thoughtseize, 4 Dolphy Voidwalker in the main, 4 Orcish Bowmaster, 4 Street Wraith, supplemented with a bunch of 2-ofs, 2 Teamer Battle Rage, 2 Souls of the Lost, 2 Unholy Heat. Consistency. Consistency is the key word. With the rise of decks like Yawgmoth and Teamer Rhinos to kind of the top of the meta, main deck Dolphy is looking really, really good in the face of the Cascade spells and the Undying creatures, or the Persist creatures. I guess the Undying creatures too, to a lesser extent, but mostly the Persist creatures. On the sideboard, we've got a Turok, a couple Blood Moon effects with Magus and Blood Moon. So the reason for the split, somebody asked not too long ago, and I don't think I explained it. The Blood Moons are really, really good against the decks with like Solitude and ways to answer creatures, but they're weaker into decks like Tron and Amulet Titan that are going to have Beseiju and ways to tutor up Beseiju, where the Magus is going to be stronger against the Beseiju kind of decks, but weaker into the Solitude stuff or the Dismembers, things like that. Bone Crusher Giant and Cast into the Fire is kind of our hate for the One Ring. 2 Terminate, a Kroxa, 2 Chalice of the Void, 2 Engineered Explosives, 2 Curse Totem for additional hate for Yawgmoth and Hardened Scales and stuff like that. Other Agatha's Soul Cauldron decks, and a Pithing Needle. Since we don't have much in terms of like the ability to stop stuff, we kind of have to load up the sideboard with as much directed hate as we can and hope it's good enough. The changes that I've made from the last time I ran Rakdos, I am a really big fan of the Fable of the Mirror Breaker Kroxa tech. Like, it's done so well for me in Jund. We've ported it over to like 4-color. We've tried it in Grixis. We've tried it in Rakdos. I think that it does a phenomenal job of what I call raising the floor of the deck. I say what I call, like, you all know what raising the floor of the deck means, but it's a very important concept for me for building Shadow decks at the moment, is making sure that like your really bad hands can still compete. Where a lot of the times when you have all-in Shadow builds, your really bad hands get blown out so easily. Like, you're all in on life loss for Shadow, and you don't see a Shadow, and your opponent just goes, haha, bolt, snap, bolt you, and you're dead. Or you go all in on, like, a Scourge of the Skyclaves, and your opponent's got a Solitude, and you're like, dang. So I do think that like the Fable Kroxa tech really helps to mitigate a lot of those fail rate hands and fail rate games. But like I said, I wanted to celebrate the holiday season with Street Wraiths and Battle Rages. So that's what we're going to do here. Let's go ahead and show off some of the matches. We did or I did go ahead and get the all access pass. So I probably won't have a ton of live streams over the holiday season, but I'm going to have a bunch of YouTube videos coming out. So keep an eye out for those. Round number 1 on the play. Turn 1 Ragavan, 2 lands. Can't really throw anything back here. Pretty good starting hand. Opponent reveals a Bloodstained Mire, so could be like the new scam iteration. Archon means probably not. Less scams playing Archon now. Take a look. All right, so it looks like a black-red Reanimator deck. A little more interaction than you usually expect to see out of Reanimator with like Molten Collapse and Blood Moon. But probably something like Bitter Reunion to get Archon into the yard. Maybe Collective Brutality like we saw there. Which we took the Brutality to make sure they couldn't get the Archon to the yard right away. Like, we've got a pretty good amount of pressure. Their hand does not line up too well. Got to surveil this Bolt to the top with Channeler, so we know we have the Dolthy answered, or in this case, top deck dashed Ragavan gets killed. Last 2 cards in hand, Dolthy, Archon. Can't cast either of them. Easy G1 onto G2. I'm going to stop saying G1 and G2. That sounds weird. Sideboarding against Reanimator. We really do not have much in terms of Grave Hate. Kind of our plan against Grave decks is 1, the main deck Dolthy, 2, Temur Battle Rage. Like, if you ever Battle Rage the Shadow against Dredge, feels pretty good. Not going to lie. So opponent's got push for our Ragavan into Dolthy. We get to kill their Dolthy. Thoughtseize away the Shieldred. Top deck a Ragavan, so pretty good to top deck a Ragavan and to hit our 3rd Dolthy. But it's okay. If you see the line of... let's talk a little bit sequencing here. So 1, I know that I'm taking this hit for Dolthy because they've got the Ragavan. They're going to have 1 unknown card. And as long as that unknown isn't a way to kill Dolthy, then I'm feeling pretty good. 2, I want to play the 2nd Dolthy before the Thoughtseize. So if they have an answer for the 1st Dolthy in response to the Thoughtseize, like I'm trying to take the Archon, cast the Archon with Dolthy. If they have a response to the Thoughtseize on the Archon and kill my non-summoning sick Dolthy, then I still get to exile the Archon with the 2nd Dolthy and hopefully stay alive to be able to cast it next turn. They could always respond to my 2nd Dolthy with a removal spell on the 1st Dolthy, but it's not completely intuitive because you don't know that I have a Thoughtseize. It's not the craziest read to make, but I don't think it's just like automatic. Either way, they let me Thoughtseize the Archon. I'm going to cast it. You know, their last card's a Persist. It doesn't really do anything. Hey, we got an Archon. Merry Christmas to us. On to match number 2. It's like another black-red Ragavan deck. This is beginning to look a lot like Timeless. It's beginning to look a lot like Timeless. Everywhere we play. Alright, so we Thoughtseize, or they Thoughtseize us, take Souls of the Lost into a Fable, pretty good. We got Bowmaster, so we can kind of mitigate Fable a little bit. Bolt on the token's really good, and we get down Dolthy. So we got a pretty good board presence. They ditch a dead Ragavan. Then hard cast a Grief. It is kind of funny that this deck is like still so prevalent despite the banning. Thoughtseize away a we thought these away their Blood Moon, dash Ragavan, get some damage in. Another hard cast Grief. So another last card is Thoughtseize. Shadow's pretty good. So we draw just in case we find like a removal spell here. Then decided to play out the Channeler, so I have 2 threats that have to be blocked. If they Thoughtseize, they're dead to either one of them. On to game 2. Sideboarding and Scam, board out Battle Rages, board out a couple Ragavan, and then I'll trim some number of like Thoughtseize or Street Wraith. Bring in anything I got that's a 2-for-1. So if there's any K commands, Croxas, stuff like that's coming in. Any extra removal spells. In this case, I think there's an extra Fatal Push, maybe. Can't remember. But this is like the matchup that I really want the Fable and Croxas in the main. Like, this is it. This is where you want that mid to late game grind. It's also really good against the 4-color decks, but seeing less and less of them. I think I saw that Omnath is no longer on page 1 of Goldfish, and that's kind of insane. So opponent wisely waits for us to ETB with Turok before Bowmastering it, killing it before the trigger resolves so it doesn't grow, but we do get the Fatal Push. Not a great spot for us, though. Staring down a flipped Reflection, so we kind of have to find a removal spell. We do not. Take a little chunk of damage here. Again, need to find an answer to the Fable. Thoughtseize isn't going to do it. On to game 3. But yeah, Rakdos is a really good, like, zone out, get the league over with ASAP kind of deck. One way or the other, you're either going to win or lose in like 17 seconds every match. So, take the good with the bad. I did bring back in a Battle Rage, and the reason for it was I kind of started thinking if a lot of these Scam players are on Molten Collapse instead of Terminate, then Battle Rage looks a little bit better. If they're on Terminates and Fatal Push, then Battle Rage looks awful. But I haven't really seen one way or the other here. I did not expect a Seasoned Pyromancer. I could have like bobbled myself to try to find a Bowmaster on their turn, but it's like a pretty narrow look. I wouldn't have thought about doing that because of Seasoned Pyromancer. So here we've got attack in with the Goon Squad. If they got a Bolt, I'm dead. If not, I get to Dothy for an EE to potentially wipe out their blocker. Obviously, it comes down to whether or not they have a way to deal with Shadow or like another Bowmaster or something. Yep. So even if we found a removal spell, they'd still have been able to block. Unfortunately, Bowmaster not only provides the blockers, but it provides the ping that they need to get me down to lethal with this attack. So, kind of rough, but that's how she goes. On to match number 3? 3? Maybe? Yeah, 3. On the play, mulligan to 6, but like it's pretty good 6. Got a couple lands, Dothy, Bolt is interaction, got Bowmaster. Little TBR action. Go ahead and be mana efficient, get down the Dothy. Believe opponent scryed 1 to the top and 1 to the bottom off this preordain. We're just kind of seeing if we can bait them into using some interaction. Them not cast, like fetching and shocking and not casting anything makes me think that they had Counterspell in hand. And we're just waiting till EOT. Thankfully, Bowmaster does play pretty well into Counterspells, so we get to kind of check the waters here. Turns out our hunch was correct. But our hunch also leads to just double Death Shadow, and that's pretty good. So I'm assuming we're up against mURktide, like no companion, Ragavan Channeler, Preordained Bolt, Counterspell. And then this is pretty fun. We get to attack with both. If they mess up blocks, we could have two potential avenues to lethal, including like Battle Rage and Bolt. So they'd have to have like Spell Snare plus Spell Pierce to not die. So we attack in. They block with Ragavan to get Delirium. Battle Rage, the blocked Shadow. It is actually important to pick where you're casting your spells. So by Battle Raging the blocked Shadow, I make it so that if they have Counterspell, they have to cast it or they die, in which case I get free resolution of Bolt. If they have something like a Brazen Borrower, they now have to bounce the Battle Rage Shadow. They can't bounce the unblocked one, which means the 8 damage gets through and they're dead to Bolt. Unholy Heat doesn't do it. Bolt to the Face doesn't do it. So, yeah, this plays around like a removal spell on my unblocked Shadow. If I Battle Rage the unblocked one and they have like a Borrower, then they just bounce that and I deal nothing. And I lose on the crackback because their Dragon's Rage Channelers are delirious. So just keep that in mind that, like, it is important where you're throwing your Battle Rage at in situations like this. Don't just say, oh, unblocked dude, Battle Rage it. No, no, no. Bad, bad. Don't do that. Let's continue. Continue the Christmas scolding of your Battle Rage casting. Game 2 against mURktide, trimming on like Ragavan, Thoughtseize. I think I trimmed on a Dauthi on the draw. Bolt on Rag, Violence. Opponent shocking in Steam Vents would lead me to believe that was their draw for the turn. Keep the Bowmaster is fine. Thoughtseize into Stern Scolding, Iteration, Blood Moon. I don't care about the Blood Moon because I've got the second basic Swamp. They've got a mURktide on top of their library. So I wanted to dash into that. They smartly draw the mURktide. I don't want to cast the Bolt because then I just make their mURktide bigger. And at the moment, I do have Unholy Heat in the deck as a potential answer to it. They've got Expressive Iteration and Blood Moon in hand. We have got Souls of the Lost. Pretty good. There goes the Iteration. Opponent's attacking with the mURktide. I was kind of surprised by this. I guess it means that they have to have a blood or a lightning bolt in hand. I think that's about the only way that attack makes sense to me. Like, I'm winning the race currently if they don't have the Blood Moon. I also should have let off on the Dauthi. I didn't really think about Stern Scolding, but if I let on the Dauthi, then that's probably good enough to get the Scolding, and then I could follow up with a Delirious Channeler, and that's going to give me like a guaranteed chump blocker. If they have the Bolt for the Channeler, then they can't kill me. Either way, on to match 4. Opponent reveals a Kahira the Orphan Guard, so probably like blue-white control. Solitude, Subtlety, usually the only kind of creatures they're really interested in. Orion revealed, so far, looking like blue-white control. That might have been a giveaway. So opponent getting snow-covered plains instead of like an island right there could mean less in on counterspell, which would normally mean something like elementals instead of, or like 4-color Omnath instead of blue-white control. But everything else is pointing to blue-white control because Prismatic Ending, Solitude, Narset. We'll get down Souls, ditch an extra Shadow because can't play out the Shadow. And we are going to pause here for half a second, let you think about the line. If you'd go for it, if you wouldn't go for it. And then we'll, as soon as you have a chance to think about it, and you can pause the video too if you need an extra second or two. There's a potential lethal line with just playing out this Shadow and letting it die. Get Souls of the Lost up to a 6/7. Go for the Battle Rage. I could choose not to do that and go for Thoughtseize plus potentially Shadow, something like that. But I kind of figure if they have an answer to the my Souls of the Lost, then they're going to do it in response to the Thoughtseize, and we're continuing on in really bad shape because I've got like a 2/2 Shadow and that's it. If they don't have an answer, then I don't kill them here because I can't get Delirium, or I can't get the 6th power, 6th permanent in the yard to be able to Battle Rage the Souls of the Lost. So I either have to go for Thoughtseize and not go for it, or no Thoughtseize and go for it, and I like to go for it, and somehow we get there. Yay. I kind of figured they had like Omnath, One Ring, something like that in hand. A little bit slower. Sideboarding in these matchups. Bolt, not the most exciting thing in the world. Turok's good. Kroxa's good. Seeing Omnath off the top of their library kind of confirms that they're 4-color Omnath. They're not blue-white control. Little Chalice of the Void. Little double Chalice of the Void. A lot of times I'll bring in like one copy of Engineered Explosives as well in these matchups, just for Chalice. If you're running like Colligan's Command, that's a better option than EE. Better option than EE to bring in for the sole purpose of dealing with Chalice. We got One Ring. We've got Bowmasters. We're attacking. Just cause why not? Opponent's got an Omnath here. We're in a pretty good chunk of trouble. Supreme Verdict also puts us in a pretty good chunk of trouble. Flash in Bowmaster eventually. I think Moto is being a little laggy here. I was really hoping that they would like immediately use their ring on their turn, like the greedy ring players they are. But opponent held up, so they got to activate it in response to my Bowmaster instead of after my Bowmaster resolved. And I didn't want to go to my turn holding up the mana. But this is another one of those matchups where Fable and Kroxa really put in a lot of work. When your opponent's like 1-for-1 answering a lot of your stuff, Fable dealing or making 2 bodies, being able to ditch like this Channeler Ragavan. Really, really nice. Drop to 7. And binding for Bowmaster is pretty much like GG here. They'll get to draw 3 more cards. If they find a fetch land, they can gain 7 life. Kind of put it out of reach. Either way, on to game 3. Thoughtseize away. So we see Counterspell, Solitude, Prismatic Ending. Take the Solitude because I'm kind of hoping to just like overload the Prismatic Ending. So playing out the double threats here for that exact purpose. Like, hey, you got to choose one of them to deal with. Opponent chooses the Ragavan, so unless they drew another Solitude and a white card, they're taking a pretty chunky little amount off of a Shadow. And they do not, so we just get to kill them on turn 4 with Shadow and a Souls of the Lost. 9/9 Shadow and a 6/7 Souls. Which we could make it into a 7/8 if we wanted to Bowmaster, ping our own Bowmaster. See, we Bowmaster our Bowmaster, so you can't Bowmaster our Bowmaster that Bowmastered our Bowmaster. It makes perfect sense if you just put 0 thought and consideration into it whatsoever. So this is match number 5. We got another opponent revealing Kahira. So could be another Elementals, could be another potential blue-white. Either way, we're just going to throw stuff at a wall and hope something sticks. Our hand right now does nothing except play creatures out. So we're going to buy into that. If they go for like a Solitude on a Dragon's Rage Channeler, we can heat our own Channeler. We just have to make sure that we don't flip over Delirium. Feel bad putting this Thoughtseize on top. Because like I would love to bend the Thoughtseize and maybe find Delirium and put like some real pressure on my opponent. But fortunately, we can't really do that. We need the Thoughtseize. One Ring protects them for the turn, but at least we could thought... Nope, can't do that. Cannot target them with protection from the One Ring. Omnath, bunch of mana, hard cast of Solitude. Not looking too great for the home team. Dolphin to Thoughtseize. Another One Ring, another Solitude. I don't like our odds here. We take the other Solitude so they can't like Solitude Dolphy, deal with the Shadow. But we are just too far behind. Ursu, One Ring. We talked about sideboarding against 4-color last game, so not going to go over that again. Here, turn 1 Ragavan, turn 2 Magus of the Moon. Hopefully it could be pretty decent. If they don't have like a Leyline Binding, or they don't have a white fetch to get Leyline Binding active. As soon as our opponent fetches up a Triome instead of basic Forest, I know they've got Solitude. I did not think they would have Solitude into Wrenn 6, reveal a Chalice off the top. So if this is one of the most hateful matchups for us, we're just over here trying to be fair, and opponents like, here's Wrenn 6 and Solitude and Chalice of the Void, One Ring, Supreme Verdict. Sounds a lot worse when you say it out loud. I could attack at the Wrenn. I'm just going to ignore that thing and hit our opponent in the face and try to get the game over with before it really matters. Because if Dolphy is surviving, then it's shutting off fetch lands anyway. We don't really care about Wrenn. Counterspell is fine. Okay. Important here. As soon as they counterspelled, then I realized my Souls of the Lost, if I ditch a land, which is why you see me ditch a land instead of the treasure token, Souls of the Lost, if I ditch a land, becomes a 7/8, which is exactly lethal. Their counter spell is now exiled under Dolthy, so I can just pass the turn holding up Dolthy for their counter spell. So if they put like a One Ring or an Omnath or something out the stack, I counter it, untap, Souls of the Lost swings in for lethal. Would have been different if that Souls of the Lost wasn't lethal right there. So game 3, all in, Wraith, Shadow hand. Got Prismatic Ending, cool. We're going to drop down a single Shadow here. I've got this line already cooked up in my head where my opponent is going to untap on 3, play it to fairy, bounce my Shadow, and I'm going to go to my turn 4, shock in Blood Crypt, double Shadow, and then they're going to go to their turn and play out a One Ring and activate it, pass back, and I'm going to Bone Crusher myself, like find a fetch land, Bone Crusher myself, attack in for lethal. I've got it in my mind. I'm so convinced it's going to work. Wait for it. Wait for it. It's happening. It's happening. We're doing the thing. We even found another threat, so that's kind of cool. Just need you to play that One Ring. One Ring, one time. No One Ring. Okay, well, that's like kind of better for me. Never mind. Never mind. Rough. So, some parties will tell you that it's easy to play around Solitude. It is when everything isn't going against you. So, like, I could choose not to play out the second Shadow there and have one Shadow and Undelirious Dragon's Rage Channeler. That's so awful into everything that they've got going on. Like, Solitude, it plays horribly into Teferi, plays horribly into the One Ring and Omnath and everything else. Like, in these matchups, you have to make them have things along the line. So, like, I play out the turn 1 Ragavan, make them have the turn 1 interaction. They had Prismatic Ending. Okay. Play out the first Shadow. Make them have an answer to that. They had the Teferi bounce. Play out the Shadows again. Like, make them have Solitude white card. And it just happens that they did. If I didn't play out both, then I run the risk of not being able to kill them, or like one Solitude shuts off that Shadow. Then I just can't play my second one. So if I'm already losing aggressively to Solitude, then I might as well make it so that I win if they don't have Solitude, instead of just making it so that, like, I don't lose as badly if they do. See what I mean? If that makes any sense whatsoever. All right, so they got Binding for the Bone Crusher, holding on to this Terminate for dear life, waiting for an Omnath. Nope, just more rings. Why ring when you can ring once more for a second time? As the kids would say. The Thoughtseize on top. I don't really want the Thoughtseize, but it does give me Delirium. Unfortunately, second Leyline Binding kind of negates all of that. So back to the drawing board. 3-2 is not terrible, especially when we were 1-1 against the Omnath decks, which is like a really, really horrendous matchup for us. I do want to go back. If it's me playing, I want to go back to the Croaks of Fable stuff. My comfort zone right now in Modern is less Wraith, less Battle Rage, less Dragon's Rage Channeler, more Kroxa, more Fable. And then it opens up a lot of space in there to kind of work in either some extra interaction if you want it, some extra 2-for-1s like K Command if you want it. You could run Liliana the Veil if you're expecting more like mid-range or control mirrors. I think it opens up a lot of possibilities. And I don't think Battle Rage necessarily gives you those same possibilities. That being said, I do love running a copy or two of Battle Rage in the sideboard. There are a lot of unfair matchups, and being able to bring it in, especially against things like Dredge that you just have a horrendous time against. But if you're able to bring in this one-shot kill card out of your board to Battle Rage of Shadow and just like, hi-yah, then it can absolutely be worth it. Other than that, like with the All Access Pass out, I'll be trying out some new configurations of pretty much every video or every variant of Shadow. Like I said, I probably won't be doing a ton of live streaming over the holiday season, but I will have more YouTube videos coming out, so look out for those. Otherwise, links down below to the deck list, to the Twitter, Twitch for when we do have live streams, and the Discord if you want to come join the Cntrlfreak Discord, talk Shadow, talk non-Shadow, talk about your pets, talk about what you got going on these holidays, anything of the sort. Come say hey, come tell us what's going on. Otherwise, hope everybody has a fantastic rest of their weekend. Have a safe holiday season. Thanks so much for coming and hanging out. Take it easy. Catch some good food. Yeah. Enjoy some good food and company. Catch y'all back live later. Adios for now.